Hello YouTube, Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review for you, as is usual. So for this one we're going to go back to Brewdog and we're going to continue on with the Unleash the Yeast 2013 series. So number 3 in this series is the Belgian Trappist. I've already reviewed for you the American Ale and the Bavarian Weizen, and I'll be reviewing the Pilsen Lager, which is the final one for you tomorrow. So as is usual then with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a very brief history of the brewery. Very short for this one because obviously I've done a lot of Brewdog beer reviews for you before, but as always, if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. And as always as well, the brewery website's in the video description for you below, along with the link to my other Brewdog beer reviews. I think there's about 30 or so of them now. But anyway, Brewdog were founded back in 2007 by two guys from Aberdeen, James Watt and Martin Dickey, and their first brewery was at the Keswick Industrial Estate in the very northeast corner of Scotland, and in 2012 they actually moved to their brand new purpose-built facility in Ellon in Aberdeenshire, which is about 20 miles or so to the north of the city of Aberdeen, the oil capital of Europe, and where I just finished studying actually. So this brewery is very well known as being quite an experimental brewery. You know, any style of beer you can pretty much think of, they will have done it at some point in their history, and in fact the only real downside to Brewdog is the fact that they produce so many different good beers, but you will only see some of them once, so that's the only real downside, is that some beers you will never see again. But hopefully they do tend to rotate their beers, and you do see some of the old ones coming back for a one-off brew and that every so often. So it does work out in that way as well. They're very well known for their very strong beers. I should point that out as well. They've got the 18.2% Tokyo Star Imperial Stout in their core range. They've got a core range of 7 or 8 beers it is, and they've got ones that they produce quite regularly outside of that as well. And then they also have their single one-off brews, which is really cool too. But what's also really cool about this brewery is that you can in fact buy into the brewery. And this is how they fund a lot of their sort of infrastructure, if you like. They run a scheme called Equity for Punks, and you can buy different levels of investment in the brewery. And essentially what that does is that it gives you a discount in the online store and when you go to the bars and stuff like that. So it's very cool. So essentially they use their fans' money. The fans back the brewery, and this allows them to expand their brewing. And this is what they used, of course, to fund their new facility in Ellon that they have. And they have a number of brew pubs throughout Scotland, England, and throughout the wider world now these days. The first one of these was in Aberdeen, and that opened back in 2009. They expanded into Glasgow and Edinburgh in 2010, and since then they've expanded all throughout England. Pretty much most of the major cities in England now have a Brewdog bar, and they've just opened up one in Gothenburg in Sweden, Florence in Italy, and they also have new ones in Tokyo in Japan and also in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Pardon me. And they're also looking to expand into the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a few other places as well. I think Paris, Brussels and Berlin were apparently on the cards for that. So keep an eye on the Brewdog website, on their brewery blog and stuff like that, and you will see what's going on at the brewery these days. Some very cool developments there. And they have actually just opened up a new bottle shop in London. I can't remember what region of London it is, but it's called Brewdog. So go and check that out if you are in London, and they will reportedly be opening a home one in the city of Aberdeen too. So I'll need to go and look at that as well at some point. But anyway, that's your sort of brief history of the brewery. These guys are pretty much the flag carriers of Scottish craft beer these days. Only 7 years old, this company though, and they've done extremely well since that time. But let's get on to the tasting of this beer now then. I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the artwork on this bottle. So this guy is it's a Belgian ale. It's 6.3%, which is the same as all the other ones in the series. I'll just read out the blurb to you on this one. It says, "It's time you got to know the real foot soldiers of the revolution, yeast. Fighting from the depths of the fermentation tank, billions of these tiny, practically invisible cells are heroically laying down their lives to magically turn sugars into alcohol. But it doesn't stop there. From Belgian Trappist to Pilsen Lager, American Ale to Bavarian Weizen, yeast has the power to change the flavour, aroma and complexion of your beer in an instant. Cue Unleash the Yeast, a mega mini series of 4 beers brewed to the same ABV using a blend of Centennial and Amarillo hops and a backbone of Pale Ale, Munich and Caramel, each created to worship a different yeast. Come and give these craft beer martyrs the recognition they deserve." So what you should basically take from that is that each of the 4 different beers in these series, they have the same base beer, and they essentially just ferment them with a different yeast strain to give you a different style of beer. And of course, as I mentioned to you earlier, the 4 in this series are the American Ale, which is an APA essentially, the Bavarian Weizen, which is a German Naturtrüb Hefeweizen, this guy, which is a Belgian Trappist Ale, and they also have the Pilsen Lager, which is a sort of Czech lager style, if you like. So let's get this guy out and get on and get onto the tasting here. It's 6.3% ABV, as I mentioned to you, Centennial and Amarillo hops in this one, with Pale Ale, Munich and caramels in it. So let's get this guy open and get on with the tasting here. So it's the standard Brewdog cap on this one, and as you can see, we had a nice smoky opening there. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting here. I'm not sure actually if they will be doing another series of these, because it did just say it's a mini series, so maybe if this was just a sort of one-off thing that Brewdog did, but hopefully we might see a couple more of these. But I can't really think how else they would kind of expand the series, because they've done quite a few different styles of it already, but they might experiment with like stouts and porters and stuff like that and just show you how this goes. But as you can see, the beer's poured a really nice kind of bright orange amber. I'll just bring the light up and let you get a better idea of that. You can see it's poured a really nice bright orange amber colour there, just a half finger of a frothy white head. That's kind of fading quite quickly, if you like. There's a little bit of carbonation just going up to the bottom of the beer, but a very kind of nice hazy orange amber. As you can see, if I put my fingers behind it, you can't see any of that at all. So a really attractive looking beer actually. So let's get into the aroma of this guy and see how we get on here. I'll just take the camera away before it plays up again. So you've got some nice caramel and toffee malts in there. This one's very, very yeasty. It's got quite a very sort of sweet yeasty aroma to it, more so than the other two in the series that I reviewed for you already. But a very sort of typical Belgian yeasty aroma in this one. This is the kind of beer style, if you like, that this series was made for, really. The other two don't. The American Pale Ale in this one, in the series, didn't actually show up the yeast all that well. But they had sort of toned down the hops. Brewdog are a very hop forward brewery, and they did tone down the hops in the American Ale one. But yeah, a lot of nice kind of caramel malts in there, toffee malts, a lot of yeasty character. Like I say, it's got a little bit of spice in it too, but there's a good bit of fruit in there. You can pick up, if you breathe it in quite deeply, you're picking up the sort of lemons and oranges. But I think there is bananas in there too. It's got a little bit of that kind of Hefeweizen aroma to it actually. It almost smells like a Belgian wit beer. But there's definitely some sort of kind of clove spice and banana in there. And a little bit of I think there's a bit of sort of grassiness to it as well, but a good bit of spice. Caramel malts and quite citricy fruits. There's maybe a bit of, it maybe has just a tiny little bit of red fruit in it as well. But it's mainly banana and yeasty aromas I'm getting from this guy. I would say definitely, yeah, it smells like a typical sort of Belgian wheat beer actually. Almost, it has a little bit of kind of German Hefeweizen character to it too in the aroma. And as you can see, the head of this guy's just sort of faded down to a layer. But let's give it a taste and see how we get on here. The main thing that's coming out is the sort of yeasty, spicy character with this guy actually. So, yeah, definitely a lot of the kind of spicy, yeasty character in there, I would say. It's got a nice sort of white bready character to it as well, and the lemons and orange are coming out just a little bit later on. It does smell of the kind of wheaty bananas, but you're not getting so much of that in the taste, I think. Nah, definitely, this is the one that's kind of showing up in this series so far. Definitely one that's showing up the yeast the best, actually. You've got just a nice sort of kind of faintly mild caramel flavour in the background, a nice little sweetness there, but on top of that you're getting this sort of spicy kind of clovey, wheaty yeast actually that's typical of a lot of Belgian wit beers. A nice sort of white, you know, like we in Scotland we get the sort of hedgehog loaves, and it does have hedgehog loaves of white bread, and it does have that kind of taste to it actually. But later on you're starting to get just in the aftertaste, it goes a little bit wetter into the aftertaste, and it's that little bit of wet character that's really bringing out the sort of citrus, the oranges and the lemons in this one, and you've got some grassy, and I think just a little bit of aromatic character, like floral aromatic herbal character, is coming out in the aftertaste with this one. It's just sitting at the back of the tongue on the middle with those nice orangey and lemon citrus flavours. Yeah, I would stick with that. In the opening, a hell of a lot of kind of bready yeast with a little bit of the kind of clovey spice character to it. You've got just a little tiny faint underlying of caramel in there, but then in the aftertaste, when you move into the latter part of the beer, which is obviously where you're going to get the hops coming out, it gets a little bit wetter on the tongue, and that's really when you're getting the orange and lemon citrus coming out, and you've got just a little bit of kind of floral and maybe aromatic grassy character in there too. It's very well done actually. It's not like a conventional Belgian beer that I've had before, but it's quite interesting. Normally I would expect a wit beer doesn't tend to look like this in my experience, but this seems to have quite a bit of the character of a wit beer in my opinion. Although, to be fair, that said, it's not so wheaty. It's more a kind of clovey spice to it, but there is some element of spice in the wheat flavour in the yeast aroma there. But overall, it's a very interesting beer. Some of these beers aren't coming out in the conventional way that a lot of Brewdog beers come out in their flavours. I mean, it's interesting to see them tone down on the hops and focus more on the yeast, and I've said that in both the videos I've done for you before, but this is quite a nice one. I would say the mouthfeel of this guy, it's definitely light, maybe pushing the mid-bodied. It's quite an oily mouthfeel. It's got soft carbonation, but it's quite dry actually. It's not cloying at all, which sometimes can be a problem with Belgian Trappist beers. They can sometimes be just a little bit too fruity. They've got the fruitiness, the hop balance on this very, very well, I would say. But I would say it actually does have quite a bit of dry character. Not so much when you're actually drinking the beer, but it comes out a lot more in the aftertaste, I feel. On the edges of the tongue, you're just feeling just a little bit of that dry character there, and in the aftertaste, you've just got the nice floral, aromatic and kind of citricy, grassy flavours just sitting in the back of the tongue, but around the edges of the tongue, it is quite dry, and that's where you're perhaps getting a little bit more of the kind of yeasty spice character coming out. But yeah, overall, I would say it's an interesting beer from Brewdog. It's not a Belgian Trappist ale in the conventional sense, and as I say, I've said that to you a couple of times with this series. They are toning back on certain things to make you notice the yeast more, and a lot of people I've seen on Rate Beer and Beer Advocate have rated these beers not so well actually, and it's obviously because these beers aren't this style in the conventional sense. Brewdog are toning back a lot so that you do notice the yeast, and I would argue with you that that's the whole point. They want you to notice the yeast and see how this can influence the flavour, and the yeast that they've put in here definitely gives you a lot of that spicy character and a nice bready and spicy character. So I would say what they wanted to do with it's not a Belgian ale in the typical sense, so if that's what you're looking for, this isn't really the beer for you in that sense. But if you want to try something and get an idea of how the yeast can influence a Belgian Trappist ale, you know, give it a go and see what you think. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review and found it informative and all of that sort of thing. I hope I've not just been sitting here and rambling away at you. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. As always, let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer. I've talked a little bit at length about this one, I feel. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. As I say, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Brewdog beer reviews. There will be plenty more of those to come for you over the next little while. But I thank you again for your support, and I will catch you soon with another beer review. The Pilsner, I will be reviewing the Pilsner beer for you later on. So I'll catch you later with that beer review. Cheers.